Kwe, good morning, bonjour, assalamu
Hello,
alaikum.
everyone.
Time for people to sit. Good morning, everyone. It is wonderful to see you all here for today's lunch and workshop for the Understanding Anti-Muslim Hate Crimes, Addressing the Security Needs of Muslim Communities, a practical guide. I would also like to welcome our online audience. At last count, we had nearly 200 participants registered to join us throughout this morning. My name is Boshra Manai, and I will be your MC and moderator today. It's an honor for me, as in my work at the City of Montreal, as its first commissioner to tackle racism and systemic discrimination, has provided me the vision and a clear view of how these initiatives are really important. Before we go further, I am pleased to introduce you to a beloved and well-respected elder of the Ottawa-Gatineau community, Elder Claudette Comenda, to open today's proceedings. Elder Comenda.
Merci beaucoup, mon ami.
Thank you so much.
Not exactly the tallest person in the house. Kwe kakina, kwe kina wia. Bonjour tout le monde, bonjour. Bonjour toutes mes amis.
Hello, everyone.
And good morning.
Hello, my
to each
friends.
one of you beautiful people. It is a beautiful day. A beautiful day because the sun is shining, the weather is beautiful. It's also a beautiful day because people, you are here. You are here as a community. You are here to share. We are here to learn. We are here to show love and kindness and respect for one another. And the work that you are doing to combat this anti-Muslim racism, hate. There's no place for hate in our heart, none whatsoever. And as we share this prayer together to acknowledge the Creator, to acknowledge the one who has blessed us with life, in our hearts and in our voice, we shall say that prayer, that all those out there, that they will feel this love, and perhaps their heart will change. But what's important is there are more good people in this world that are just filled with love and kindness. And I really, truly feel that love and kindness in this room and the work that you're doing. To you, Miss Hamira, to you and your team, thank you so much for your strength, your courage, and thank you for the respect of the Algonquin people and asking me to be here to bring a blessing, to bring a welcome. Chimigwech Nidangwe. As I say, Nidangwe is a word in the language that we say, we use from a woman to a woman. Nidangwe. You're more than my sister. You're more than my friend. You're my sister. We are sisters of the heart. Migwej nichkiwe dug. Migwej kibijaye goma nongum. Pijaje koma anishnabe eki o mama weniniwag. To all who are here in person and as well as those who are joining us virtually, I welcome each and every one of you. Bienvenue à tous. Bienvenue ici à la terre.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe territory. Our ancestors always welcome you here.
And our ancestors and our communities, we welcome you into this beautiful homeland of the Algonquin people. The homeland that we refer to as unsurrendered, unceded, the homeland that has been entrusted onto us since time immemorial, and the homeland that we must ensure will be here forevermore for our children who are here today and tomorrow. As I acknowledge my ancestors, Anishinaabe, Otsukaw, Winni, Genwen, Daganug, and all my relatives who are in the spirit world, I acknowledge the ancestors of Indigenous peoples from coast to coast to coast. And I acknowledge each and every one of you, your ancestors. We must never forget our ancestors, for our ancestors continue to pray for us, and they continue to guide us, and they continue to walk with us. Let us remember our ancestors. Let us put our hearts, our mind, our spirit, and our voice together as one. Let us offer a prayer, what we say in our language, Emiyawin, a song of our heart to the Creator, the one who made all. And there is only one God. But in our way as Anishinaabe people, we understand him differently. But we know that he loves everyone. We know that he has created all. We know that he continues to bless us. And we know that he is the maker of all those beautiful natural elements that he has provided us with each and every day as human beings to live upon the earth, our mother, that one mother for all, our mother, the Jojoaki, that one set of grandparents that he's blessed all peoples of the world with, our grandfather, the sun, and our grandmother, the moon, and all those waters from that plant life, the medicine life, and the animal life, and all humans. And no matter where we come from, we give thanks to the Creator for bringing us together in this beautiful circle of life, in this beautiful circle that we are here today. He has blessed us with being related in the human family. And we have that connection to our Mother, the Earth, all of us, no matter where we come from, no matter our color, no matter our title, and no matter what we believe. And I will offer some words of prayer in my people's language, in the way that I was taught, in the way that I believe. And I invite you into the circle of prayer. For those that want to stand, you may stand. For those that want to remain seated, please remain seated. For we, when we are in our lodge and when we pray, we remain seated because we remain close to our Mother, the Earth. And I ask that you share your words of prayer, your words of appreciation in the way that you believe, in the way that you were taught. We do not impose our ways on anyone, but we welcome everyone into our circle. Chimigwaj, migwaj kishiminado, kichimigwaj kina, kego, chimigwaj. Kichimigwaj kishiminado onje kakina nichkiwe dug, chimigwaj kishiminado, kichimigwaj onje kakina, from the Muslim community. Migwaj kishiminado nichkiwe dug. Gishiminado nibuksendam, mashkawizu onje nongo mashishwabang. Nibuksendam gishiminado, nibuksendam. Kokamisag shishmishomsag kibija yegoma nongum nibuksendam widokowado duenonji nongum ashishwabang. Migwejni jenwandaganak kichimigwej. Chimigwej onji kizagi duin gishiminado. Nibuksendam nibakawin. Manajitawawin. Mashkawiziwin. Minupamadzuin. Migwej. Creator, I stand before you with a humble heart. I stand before you and all my ancestors and my relatives who are in the spirit world. And I say these words to you, Creator, from my heart and my spirit, to offer this prayer for this meeting here today. Creator, I say this prayer in love and kindness and respect for the Muslim brothers and sisters and their communities. We acknowledge you, Creator, and we give thanks for all of your blessings. We thank you, Creator, for life. And Creator, I ask that the grandmothers and the grandfathers of the four directions to be in the circle, to protect the circle, and to protect the work that Miss Amira and her team are doing. And Creator, we ask that you loan us your wisdom, your strength. We ask that you loan us, Creator, the bravery and the courage that is needed to do this good work, to move aside hate, but always bring forth love. And Creator, I ask that you protect this circle and protect this work, and that together, Creator, we walk this road of love, Zagi Edwin. And Creator, I ask that you bless all our hearts and our minds with wisdom, with respect, and with kindness. And may the voices be heard, and may we all learn. And I thank you, Creator. Thank you for hearing our prayer. And I ask that all of our loved ones who are in the spirit world, as our ancestors who are in the spirit world, continue to guide us, to keep us safe. And Creator, you know each and every person, our heart and our mind. And for anyone who has a special prayer for a friend, for a family member, and even those out there, Creator, that are strangers to us, to send that prayer, and may you comfort them. And Creator, we also say a prayer for those that don't understand or feel love. And may they feel love and kindness through your blessings, Creator, for we are doing our responsibility as brothers and sisters to walk together on a peaceful road of kindness, of love. And we will show our children and our future children and our grandchildren the true essence of what it's meant to be as a human being in that gift that you've given us, Pimadzuin. And we thank you, Creator, for that life. She miigwaj kishimanado, miigwaj ni janwan daganag, miigwaj onji, kiniwin nemi yawin, ashish ninuwin nemi yawin, miigwaj. Thank you, miigwaj.
Thank you so much, Elder Kamanda, for sharing your wisdom and for starting us in a right way. A few housekeeping notes. So for those joining us online, there is a simultaneous interpretation available. There are 2 channels available, English and French, and there's a Q&A box that is being monitored, so you can use it. Those in the room should have a headset for interpretation. I will switch from French to English. Washrooms are located outside the hallway, and we have helpful volunteers that could assist you. Please be sure to keep the aisle between the 2 parts and the 2 sections to left and right without traffic. This morning session is being recorded. Finally, when you receive the reminders for today's event, you will have also received an agenda, as well as a link for the guide we are launching in Canada for your reference. So now on to the program. First, a sincere thank you to all of our partners. So the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe's Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, UNESCO, housed in Canada Council for the Arts, the Canadian Race Relations Foundation, and the Government of Canada's Federal Anti-Racism Secretariat. Without our partners, today would not have been possible. I would like to acknowledge the officials and elected representatives that are with us this morning and that are here, even if their busy schedules would not allow them, including the first week of the parliamentary session to join us. The Honorable Minister Kamal Khaira and Honorable Minister Arif Virani, whom we shall hear from shortly. We're also pleased to have Honorable Minister Mary Ng, Honorable Senator Salma Ataullah Jan, Parliamentary Secretaries Samir Zuberi and Paul Chiang. It's not going to be this way for all day long. Members of Parliament Garnet Genuis, Lindsay Mattison and Salma Zahid. From Canadian Heritage, Associate Deputy Minister Malak Khana and Assistant Deputy Minister Gavin Codet. From the Department of Justice, Michael Souza, Senior Assistant Deputy Minister. From the RCMP, Alison Whelan, Senior Assistant Deputy Minister, Reform, Accountability and Culture. From the Canada Council for the Arts, Michelle Shaula, Director and CEO. Also with us, Carrie Dart, Deputy Commissioner with the Ontario Provincial Police. And finally, from the City of London, Amr Khan, the Muslim Community Liaison Advisor. Thank you all for joining us. Now I'm very pleased to introduce the Honorable Kamal Khaira, Minister of Diversity, Inclusion, and Persons with Disabilities, to share her remarks.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you. Thank you so much for that very kind introduction. I'm so glad to be here with all of you today. And I want to start out by thanking Elder Claudette for starting us off on such a beautiful, for your wisdom and a beautiful prayer for all of us. As I know, there'll be many discussions that are going to be very important. So I just want to say thank you. It's always good to see you and for beautiful words and wisdom. Let me also begin by saying just how wonderful it is to be joined here by so many wonderful colleagues, as had been mentioned. Especially, I want to thank Minister Ng, who just was here and had to leave. And of course, my colleague, Minister Virani, who I know you'll have an opportunity to hear from very shortly. I also believe my Parliamentary Secretary, Samir Zubiri, who will be also joining us very shortly as well. And I also want to acknowledge that in this room, I see parliamentarians from every party. And I'm glad that we can collectively come together for this important event. I believe very strongly that diversity is a fact of life, but inclusion is a choice. And our government has been very deliberate in making that choice. Diversity and inclusion are a key part of who we are as Canadians. It's our job, our responsibility as Canadians to stand up for those values every single day. I know that for many here today, of course, the folks that are online as well, the ongoing trial of the accused has real impacts on individuals, on families, and the community as a whole. And for some, it may be reopening wounds or increasing feelings of fear and anxiety. My message to our Muslim community here today, and right across the country, is that our government and Canadians will always stand with you. Hateful, extremist, violent ideologies have no place in Canada. These actions cannot and will not stand. Our government is firmly committed to combating hate in all its forms, including Islamophobia. And I can tell you my personal goal in this role as the Minister of Diversity, Inclusion, and with persons of disabilities is to ensure that we take a whole of government approach to addressing hate. At the same time, we continue to move forward on developing and implementing a renewed anti-racism strategy, as well as Canada's first ever action plan on combating hate. And today, I'm extremely proud to be part of the launch of the guide to address anti-Muslim hate crimes. This guide, it's such an important tool for law enforcement. And I have to say, it's so wonderful to see, of course, members of the Peel Police as well that are here today that I know on ground have been doing tremendous work in my own community in Brampton, community organizations and governments. It would also help to ensure that we're meeting the needs and expectations of the community. More importantly, this guide will help assist to better support Muslim communities through aspects like awareness, security, advocacy support, and best practices, so that we can continue to stand with them as allies. Now, I know in just a moment, you will hear from Canada's Special Representative on combating Islamophobia, our good friend and no stranger to anyone in this room, Amira. In the short time since her appointment, I can tell you in February, she has made tremendous impact in our communities throughout Canada. She's a champion and advocate for Muslim communities, and we're so grateful that, Amira, you are working as an expert advisor to the government, playing a key role in enhancing our support to combat Islamophobia and to address barriers faced by Muslim communities. So thank you all. once again for being here today, for choosing to stand with all of us to build a safer, more inclusive Canada for all. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you, Minister Khera. Next, I'm very pleased to introduce the Honorable Arif Virani, Minister of Justice and the Attorney General of Canada, to share his remarks.
Thank you and assalamu alaikum. Merci beaucoup and bonjour.
Hello, everyone.
I want to start where Kamal sort of started with Elder Claudette Commanda. And thank you, Kamal, for those amazing words and really setting this off in a perfect direction. Claudette, I noticed, I've heard you speak many times, but I noticed when you said Chimigech Nidongwe and you looked at Amira and you explained it, I just reflected on you commenting upon these bonds of sisterhood. And I reflected as a Muslim man, as a privilege to serve in cabinet as the first ever Muslim Attorney General, about how we greet each other in the Muslim community. And we often say to my Muslim brothers and sisters. So the notions of commonality and familiarity are very clear and rife among Muslims, and it's beautiful to see you as an Indigenous ally reaching out in that same way. So thank you, Chimigwech. I want to say good morning to everyone for being here for this really important invitation. And I wanted to say how pleased it is for me to be here with Mary, who unfortunately had to leave, and with Kamal, but also to see that diversity in terms of political representation, to see people online, senators, members of parliament, parliamentary secretaries, people from different political parties. This is critical because this can't be a one-party issue. This has to be a non-party issue. I wanted to recognize Amira. I thought Kamal beat me to the punch a little bit, but Amira is a woman who deserves all the recognition that she gets. Amira is a woman who was one of my first points of contacts as a parliamentarian when we were in the trenches fighting from 2015 onwards about changing narratives, about understanding. Her fight against intolerance and fight against discrimination has been long-seated and very, very lengthy and credible. And having you in this position just gives me great confidence in the work that is happening today, but in the work that is coming. So shukran jazilan, which means thank you very much in Arabic. Au sein d'une démocratie stable et solide comme celle du Canada,
In the Canada's democracy, we should expect to be able to go around in the street, be able to take the subway, without being attacked or persecuted, but it's not always the case. Hate is present within our community and online, and this can have tragic consequences.
Because a lot of us, including people in this room, have lived these tragic consequences. Islamophobia is real, Islamophobia is pernicious, and it is critical to call out Islamophobia by its name. This is an issue, unfortunately, that I'm deeply familiar with. As a lawyer, as a cabinet minister now, as a racialized person, as a Muslim man in this country. Personally, I came to the country in 1972. My family was expelled from Uganda by a brutal military dictatorship. I grew up as a brown-skinned Muslim man in a country that doesn't look a lot like me. I came to understand that for Canada and all that Canada offers, there are certainly things that we need to do better. In July 2021, when we convened a national summit on Islamophobia, we learned that there are more Muslims. Sorry about that. Yes, that is my ringtone. But that was another strong equity advocate, Michael Cotto, about to call me. Maybe he was saying, Arif, what room is it in? There are allies everywhere for this cause and the broader cause of equity. And I'm sure he'll appreciate the shout out, even though he's not actually here. But back to where I was. On the summit on Islamophobia, we learned, I knew this, but many people learned, that more Muslims have suffered fatal consequences by virtue of anti-Muslim hate in this country than anywhere else in the G7. That's startling. It's extremely startling. And when we talk about this, we need to talk about its pernicious, fatal consequences. And there are moments that are burned in the memory of Muslims like me around this country. January 29th, 2017, I remember when I heard the news about what had happened at the mosque in Sainte Foy. I remember hearing from Mohammed Hashim about how he was there the very next day, and him recounting stories to me about what people went through and the courage of those who put themselves in the line of fire to save other worshippers that were in that mosque. 6 men were killed that day, 18 others were injured, and families have been irreparably harmed. There's a fatal stabbing of a man at the IMO Mosque in Rexdale in 2020, a man who was volunteering as sort of a mosque guardian. Kamal touched on what happened in London. And the hardest thing for me about what happened in London is that I was married in London. I go to London frequently, and a man decided to search for people that look like Amira or look like my then 7-year-old son's teacher who wears a hijab, and drove a car into them. And sometimes it's hard to be a member of parliament, and sometimes it's just hard to be a dad, because when you're trying to explain to a 7-year-old about what life is like, you're protective. Everyone's protective of their kids, right? It's just a natural parenting instinct. But when you see a cloud of confusion over a 7-year-old's face about, what do you mean they targeted somebody who looked like my teacher? Why would they do that? It's hard. It's a hard moment as a dad, let alone a hard moment as an MP or a parliamentary secretary or a minister. And those days are still hard. I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you, but you always try and reflect on things that are moving in a better direction. And when I'm here today, and when I'm seeing the launch of a guide like this, and I'm seeing the work that Amira and so many others in this room are doing, I think that's a shred of positivity, where you can see concrete actions. You know, Kamal mentioned the law enforcement officials that are here. Law enforcement has come a long way, and there continues to be things that we can assist in terms of law enforcement, et cetera. But this kind of guide and this kind of launch helps in that effort. And that's what I try and leave my son with. That's what I try and leave other Muslims with. That's what I try and leave other people who are equity supporters with. And I think that's what's really, really critical about what's going on today. The other thing I'm encouraged by in terms of the room that I'm seeing is the allies that I'm seeing. And I isolated one because she's right in front of me, and she does such a great work in terms of indigenous allies. But when I see people like Richard Marceau from CIJA, when I see people that are working on the fight against anti-Semitism, the fight against transphobia and homophobia, people from the Black community that are fighting against anti-Black racism, I think that's when we actually make even more progress, because it can't be just me and Amira talking in some back corridor about the fight against anti-Muslim hatred. It's got to be with other people who are allies and with everyone else in this country, because once we mainstream that discussion, that's when we actually start to make progress. So I've deviated wildly from the great script that my staff prepared for me. But what I'd say to you is that that's encouraging for me. That's what I take some comfort in. I know the work is hard and needs to be done, but this, to me, this kind of concrete guide and this kind of concrete action, where we're actually collaborating not just nationally, but internationally, that's absolutely a step in the right direction. Thank you for making sure I'm a part of it. Thank you for the work you're doing. Shukran jazilan, merci beaucoup. And I hope today's discussions prove very fruitful. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Virani. Next, we will hear this video message from Matteo Mecacci, Director, Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights.
Honorable Ministers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure to welcome you on behalf of ODIHR to this launch of our practical guide, Understanding. Honorable Ministers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure to welcome you on behalf of ODIHR to this launch of our practical guide, Understanding Anti-Muslim Hate Crimes and Addressing the Security Needs of Muslim Communities. I would like also to extend my heartfelt gratitude to our valued partners, the Canadian Government, the Canadian Commission for UNESCO, as well as the Canadian Race Relations Foundation for your support and assistance in making this event possible. The tragic murder of the Afzal family brought home to all of us how important it is for society to unite in combating hatred against Muslims. This heinous crime is a stark reminder of the real and devastating consequences of hatred, prejudice, and bigotry. Therefore, it is all the more important to see your dedication to combat intolerance and discrimination, and towards fostering a more inclusive and equitable society for all, which underscores the pivotal role that collaboration and partnership play in our collective mission. Ladies and gentlemen, you may know that with 57 participating states in North America, Europe, and Asia, the OSCE is the world's largest regional security organization. All OSCE states have agreed that lasting security cannot be achieved without respect for human rights and democratic institutions. But anti-Muslim hate crime, as one of the most violent manifestations of intolerance, continue to threaten the security not just of individuals, but also of the increasingly diverse society across the OSCE region. ODIHR works to support states across the region in meeting their commitments to combat intolerance and hatred. And a vital element of this work is our hate crime database, the largest of its kind worldwide. Our latest dataset for the year 2021 included accounts of 144 anti-Muslim hate crimes reported by police in Canada. This is already troubling enough, but due to the underreporting of hate crimes, this number may only represent the tip of the iceberg. Because despite the commitments made by OSCE countries to prevent and combat hate crime, Muslims and their communities remain the target of rhetoric that seeks to denigrate them, belittle their contributions, and devalue their way of life. We therefore need to address the worrying trends toward anti-Muslim hate speech while simultaneously working alongside Muslim communities to understand their security needs and to tackle the problem of underreporting and underrecording of anti-Muslim hate crimes. A gender-sensitive approach is also needed to ensure we address intolerance that specifically targets Muslim women and girls on the grounds of their religion, ethnicity, and gender. I therefore commend all of you for taking part, for supporting this event, and for your role in today's launch. ODIHR's guide is just one of a number of programs, resources, and tools that we have developed to assist governments as well as civil society in their efforts to counter intolerance against Muslims. ODIHR stands ready to offer further support to Canada in meeting its commitments in this critical area of work. No Muslim in this country, or indeed in any other, should have to live in fear. It is therefore my sincere hope that today's launch event will lead to an open and thoughtful assessment of the security situation of the Muslim community in Canada, and that together we can find ways to effectively addressing these crimes. I wish you all fruitful discussions and success in the work that lies ahead. Thank you very much.
Comme M. Mekachi n'entendra pas mes remerciements, nous allons le remercier quand même d'avoir pris le temps.
Mr. McCatchy will unfortunately hear my thanks, but we will record everything for him and he will be able to hear it. Now we are going to pursue today's day with a speech from Mr. Lecoq, who will talk to us, who is the Secretary General of the Canadian Commission for UNESCO.
Mesdames et messieurs,
Ladies and gentlemen, Madam Minister,
la représentante spéciale du Canada chargée de la lutte contre l'islamophobie, Monsieur le Ministre, distingués invités, bonjour. Oui. Et bienvenue au Conseil des arts du Canada, notre maison, bienvenue chez vous. Je tiens à vous le dire tout de suite, mon intervention se fera en français. Merci beaucoup à Claudette Commanda pour ces magnifiques mots d'ouverture. Vous êtes ici, chez vous, et nous vous remercions plutôt de nous accueillir chez vous. Merci à vous. La Commission canadienne pour l'UNESCO est heureuse de figurer parmi les organisateurs de l'événement d'aujourd'hui. La publication, qui sera au cœur des discussions au cours de la journée, invite chacun d'entre nous, quelle que soit son identité,
at the heart of our identity, and we will be deepening our reflection and our commitment to the fight against intolerance and discrimination against Muslims in our various roles and functions, but also today in our daily lives. UNESCO was created in 1945 in the aftermath of the Second World War, and the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. It is the champion of equity, peace, and sustainable development. At the Canadian Commission for UNESCO, which implements UNESCO's mandate and initiatives in Canada, the fight against racism and discrimination is one of the 4 pillars of our current strategic plan. One of the ways that we deal with this is to through our network of UNESCO chairs, which is made up of university professionals who conduct research and develop tools to help communities across Canada to deal with critical social issues. Let me give you a couple of examples. In 2018, the first UNESCO chair in the world for the prevention of radicalization and violent extremism was created at the University of Sherbrooke in Quebec in partnership with the University of Quebec in Montreal and Concordia University. Professor Barbara Perry, whom I salute, is an illustrious member of this network, and she holds the UNESCO chair in hate research at the Ontario Tech University. She's also the director of the Center on Hate, Bias, and Extremism, which has advanced evidence-based research to inform policy and practice. The Canadian Commission for UNESCO also works to combat prejudice and discriminations through its network of UNESCO schools that has 100 members across the country and ensures that education is developed and delivered in a focus of equity, inclusion, and diversity. I hope that today's meeting and discussions will allow you to find synergies in order to find these synergies between our work here at UNESCO and at the Canada Council for the Arts and your work in order to be able to forge cross-sectoral collaboration and build a better future for Muslim communities in Canada. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Merci, Monsieur le Secrétaire Général.
Thank you so much, Mr. Secretary General. We are now going to continue this morning with Mohammed Hazim, who is the founder for the Race Relations Board.
Good morning, everybody. So first of all, I just want to say thank you to Amir for the invitation. We miss her very much at the Canadian Race Relations Foundation, where she used to work with us, but now she's on to better pastures. So I want to just address something that you said in your opening prayer, Elder Claudette. You prayed for strangers, and you prayed for them to feel kindness and compassion to each other. And I can't remember anyone saying that in a long time. You know, when I look online and I see spaces where an increasingly more divided country, people, we don't look at each other for compassion or convey empathy or kindness. We look to see how we are gratified in our own spaces, more so than enunciating a sense of generosity to each other and kindness. So your thoughts there really resonated, because, you know, when we see what's happening online and currently the behavior of social media companies who, you know, will rather block news than play ball with governments, I don't know what kind of hope we have to get them to start working with us to create online safety, to address online hate, to address all these issues that we see are precipitating throughout. And the reason why that is so absolutely necessary is because, you know, what we see online doesn't just live online. And we're seeing that manifested through small acts and big acts. And we're seeing it in more frequencies, where you see the numbers in hate crimes increasing across this country, not just towards Muslim communities, but to everybody. And it's happening at a frequency that is accelerating. If we see the same accelerations that we see in hate crimes and you know, in murders or thefts or whatever it might be, you would see the police and community going upside down, because we just don't see that. Like crime goes up, but hate crimes are going up significantly higher. And I honestly believe that in the absence of there being some sense of regularity or expectation for civility in the online space, we cannot create a society that looks to pray for each other. We will just continuously be going and digging further holes to look at how we need to just look after ourselves versus our collective responsibilities. So thank you so much for evoking that sideways conversation. I do want to mention that, you know, Minister Virani talked about the Quebec City massacre. For me, this anti-Muslim hate and Islamophobia is, I've seen, you know, bloody carpets and bullet holes. And to me, it's very, it's visceral to see what the impacts have looked like. And part of what I think we need to do more so is, and I remember this one moment, the day after Quebec, the massacre, we were sitting in a basement with law enforcement. And they were explaining to us, like as a community, like what have they been doing? And I had so many questions. I'm like, why did you not help them prepare this? There was a pig's head left in front of this mosque like 3 weeks ago, or a month ago, and the person was let go. And, you know, how could you not have worked with this community better? And now we're seeing the devastating consequences of such. So for us, that has always sat in my bones in terms of ensuring that there was a better response from systems to be able to not just, you know, address hate from the criminal code context, but to help communities feel more protected, to have the better resources to be able to do stuff. We've seen the Jewish community honestly do an incredible job at like helping synagogues be more prepared. It's amazing the work that they do, but they do in tandem with law enforcement, and we all need to kind of learn from that. And so I took those learnings, and in 2022, we reached out to the RCMP and said, hey, Alison Whelan, who's the Assistant Deputy Minister, her and I were having a chat, and we said, you know, this is what I've seen. And she said, well, let's go tackle it together. So we created a national task force on hate crimes. And with that, we have Faraz Ishmael from Peel and others, I think, who are here as well, who are honestly, we're going to transform the way this country deals with hate. We're going to do it. We have the best experts. We have the best Crown prosecutors. We have the best police crime investigators, statisticians, who are looking at the best practices of how the criminal justice system responds to hate. And we're going to create national standards to address them right across this country. And I really appreciate the opportunities that have been bestowed upon us to be able to do this work significantly more deeper by all our partners in the room, too many to count. But we're going to do it because I think that in the absence of us not doing so, and in the absence of there being some sense of regularity in the online space and the velocity by which the online spaces are now perpetrating or creating these fissures within society, it scares me to imagine what this future is going to look like for my kids. And when we talk about London, Ontario, one thing that Amira really sat with me, said to me and told me was that the impact of the friends of the 12-year-old who was murdered in that, the kids who went to school with her, what were the supports they were getting, or the lack of the supports that they were getting? And the impact of that, what we see here on hate, not just on all of us, but on the kids and their sense of safety, their sense of belonging in this country, their sense of owning a responsibility to take care of this country and this land. I don't know what that's going to look like unless we address this. So we're really looking forward to this guide to see how we can implement it in the work that we're doing in our task force. And we really appreciate the opportunity to be involved here. So thank you very much for having me, and have a great afternoon.
Merci, Mohamed. Nous entendrons maintenant Peter Flegel.
Thank you, Mohamed. So now we're going to hear from Peter Flegel, who is the Executive Director of the Federal Anti-Racism Secretariat.
Assalamu alaikum. Say that again. Assalamu alaikum. All right. Bonjour à tous. Good morning to everyone. Et merci, Bosra, pour l'introduction.
Thank you. That's say may peace be with you. And thank you to all of our representatives and the special guests who are here for such an important event.
The power of love. The power of love to heal. The power of love to bring us together. The power of love to break down barriers. Because in a time, in a world where we're all being pulled apart and told to be divided, the power of love can bring us a long way. So as a partner in this launch, it is a great pleasure for me to be among you this morning. It was just over 2 years ago that my team and I had the honor of organizing Canada's first ever National Summit on Combating Islamophobia. With close to 500 Muslim leaders, the Prime Minister, several cabinet ministers, and my team listened attentively as participants shared harrowing stories of discrimination, of bullying, of vandalism, of violence, of distress and trauma. They laid bare the unfortunate truth. Islamophobia is well and alive in the Canada of today. But it was not simply a matter of sharing stories of pain, for we spent the bulk of the day listening as creative and, dare I say, life-saving and transformative solutions were crafted to help us all achieve a country without Islamophobia. And among the main recommendations presented was creating a new position, Canada's first ever special representative on combating Islamophobia. So you can just imagine the sheer excitement and joy of my team and I when a year later, the position was established, and then in January of this year, Amira El-Gawabi was appointed into the role. Her appointment was a living testimony to the power of community to take a stand, the power to speak up, and the power to advocate for what is right and just in a world far too consumed by hate, division, and indifference. Et grâce au mandat vaste et ambitieux de la représentante spéciale qui comprend
And thanks to this vast and ambitious mandate to our special representative, we have already seen some concrete actions and results with the launch of this guide.
In supporting our critical work of combating systemic Islamophobia in Canada. And to be frank, this launch could not have happened sooner. This year alone, Stats Canada indicates that police reported hate crimes targeting Muslims has increased by 71%. Islamophobia has also surged online, particularly impacting Muslim youth. And the murder trial of a Muslim family in London, Ontario, that was committed against a Muslim family in London, Ontario, has just begun. All of this is a painful reminder of the need to take action now for the safety of Muslim communities. For we know that this Islamophobic violence is intersectional, it is gendered and racialized, as the Senate study on Islamophobia in Canada, led by the Standing Committee on Human Rights, has confirmed. Muslim women, Black Muslim persons, particularly Muslim women who wear the hijab, are particularly at risk. Au Secretariat fédéral de lutte contre le racisme, nous avons le mandat.
The Federal Secretariat, we have a mandate to have a pan-governmental approach to fight discrimination, hatred,
strategy and under the leadership of Minister Kamal Kira, my team and I are deeply committed to working together with Muslim communities to eradicate Islamophobia. For in the Federal Anti-Racism Secretariat, not only do you have an ally, but you have a friend. So let us continue standing and working together, withstanding those who seek to pit us against each other, and let us rather take stock of the role we can all and must play in building a better, safer, and consciously more inclusive Canada. Shukran. Merci.
Tout le monde a parlé d'elle.
Everybody has spoken about her. I think you finally all are dying to meet her. Before giving you the floor, Amira, I have to tell you to what extent I am happy that it is you who are sitting in this chair. As a racialized Muslim woman, I think that we have our our words to say, and I think that you are the perfect person for this role. So it's my great pleasure to introduce you to Amira Al-Gawabi, the first ever special representative on combating Islamophobia, to set the scene for us and understanding anti-Muslim hate and crimes and contemporary manifestations thereof. Thank you. So there you go, Amira.
Good morning, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. Bonjour tout le monde. Merci beaucoup pour être avec nous aujourd'hui.
Thank you so much for being here today.
My heart is very full, and I just want to say to Elder Claudette Commanda, your words of wisdom, you know, I've heard you before, and I'll always carry with them. And one of the things I've learned from you on many occasions before I even imagined that a role like this could exist, was the idea of the circle, that we all belong to a circle. And when we have new people joining the circle, we make space and we get larger, we get stronger. And so later today, there will be a soft launch of my website for this office. And if you actually see the visual identity that the comms team at Heritage has worked so hard on, it actually has a maple leaf with Islamic architecture and then a circle holding it through. So that is in testimony and in tribute to the Indigenous Algonquin and Anishinaabe peoples on which land we are. And it is a very important part of the foundation of the work we're all engaged in on addressing hate and those who are trying to make us not work together, but we are going to show them how it's done. So thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you, Minister Kira, for being here. It has been such a lovely honor to have already started to work with you. Thank you, Minister Varani. I feel funny saying minister because, as you said, we go way back. But I want to, really acknowledge as the first, as you mentioned, Muslim Attorney General of Canada, Minister of Justice. What an honor, and how much joy for our communities. Representation matters. It matters. And those little girls and little boys and little children who are watching all of us, we are showing them that we can participate, we can contribute, no matter what anyone says, no matter what your background, no matter who you are. We are all together to make society better. So thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Samir, for being here and being the new Parliamentary Secretary for supporting Minister Kira on diversity and inclusion and persons with disabilities. Thank you so much. And thank you to all my friends and members of the community who are also here to be witness to the launch of this guide. So I'm going to jump into a bit of a scene setter for you to talk a little bit about what we are addressing today. So first of all, Islamophobia on the global stage. There is an unprecedented number of anti-Muslim violence fueled by hatred, with the UN Rapporteur on Freedom of Religion or Belief underscoring the epidemic proportions of attacks. The international response to growing acts of violence geared at Muslims ranges from the Christchurch call to action to eliminate terrorist and violent extremist content online, the UN General Assembly resolution designating March 15th, the International Day to Combat Islamophobia. Many countries have also passed anti-hate crime legislation or bolstered existing legislation to address the security concerns of their Muslim citizens. So actually, it was interesting that when I was at the Canadian Race Relations Foundation working with Mohammed and his team there, we had actually gotten the call from the OSCE to launch this guide. And that's actually where this all started. And over time, and you'll hear later from Sabrina Saoudi from OSCE, ODIHR, she followed me to this office and until we were able to make this launch possible. So this work has been in play for quite some time. And sadly, it is because of that international dimension of what we're talking about. So now if we think about it domestically, and it was mentioned that in 2021, Statistics Canada reported that the number of police-reported hate crimes targeting Muslims increased by 71% of that previous year. I want to note that that high number is the same year that the Afzal family was killed. And it is that attack that brought so many people across Canada together to say enough of hate, enough of Islamophobia, and was indeed the impetus to the Islamophobia Summit and then the establishment of this office. And as also has been noted, Canada is the only G7 country with the highest number of recorded deadly attacks against Muslims. A plethora of factors and complex issues underpin Islamophobia in Canada, including the over-securitization and the mischaracterization of Muslim Canadians in media and policy. Ultimately, this has led to a breach in trust between Muslim Canadians and their public institutions, including law enforcement. In my initial days in this role, I had an opportunity to meet with communities in the 3 provinces with the highest number of Muslims, Ontario, Quebec, and Alberta. And every single community I visited, every single family member, especially visibly Muslim women who wear the hijab, were talking about how concerned they were just walking in their neighborhoods. You know, I often tell a story of, growing up here in Ottawa, going to the mosque on Scott Street. When I was little, we never thought about security. That was never something that I worried about. And now, sadly, when I'm there, and if I'm there with my son, I will always check where's the closest exit. And we never had to do that. And I have learned from, my sisters and brothers in the Jewish communities that this has been a long reality in their communities and in other communities as well. And no community should ever have to worry about themselves, their children. And so it is so important that we do come together. The good news, as we try to find that good news in all of this, as Minister Varani mentioned, is that the government of Canada has, of course, demonstrated its commitment to protecting its citizens and safeguarding the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which includes freedom of religion, freedom of thought, belief, and expression. Malgré les difficultés, le gouvernement du Canada reste déterminé à
the Canadian government wants to protect its citizens and protect the rights to religion, thoughts, and expression. And this is within the Charter.
We had the National Summit on Islamophobia. I was a participant, and it included people from across the country, including Muslim civil society organizations. And there were many robust policy recommendations, including the appointment of a special representative with an independent office. And I'm very happy to say that as of this week, we are a full complement. We have 5 team members in the office, and some of them are in this room, some of them are floating around. And I just want to take a moment to thank the Department of Heritage with Deputy Minister Isabelle Mondou's leadership, who has allowed us to do this work. Malakana, who is in the room as Associate Deputy Minister, has been doing wonderful work, and Gavin Cadet as well, who helped us make this office a reality. In addition to the recommendations, we've also been seeing funding support to anti-racism action programming and to communities at risk through federally funded security infrastructure program at Public Safety Canada, and the funding also through Heritage for different anti-racism initiatives. There's also been a commitment to undertaking a systemic examination into issues of discriminations expressed by Muslim-led charities. And so I've already had an opportunity to meet with the Canadian Revenue Agency. And of course, that is work that's underway. In 2023 to 2024, my office will also work closely with all relevant partners to provide expert advice on how we can really implement many more recommendations and launch a new national Islamophobia strategy. Now, Canada's current toolbox on addressing Islamophobia, to date, Canada's current legal mechanisms, policies, and tools include some safeguards to protect Muslim Canadians from attacks, which includes the National Anti-Racism Strategy, which is underway, as Peter Flagel from the Anti-Racism Secretariat flagged, and who I'm very happy to be working with and his team. Despite these mechanisms, there's still a gap in ensuring adequate protection For Muslim Canadians, and I want to take this moment to say, when we fix gaps for any community, we're fixing gaps for all communities. And we're raising the bar and raising the standard to ensure that no one is worried about their safety. So we're addressing that type of widespread anti-Muslim hatred coupled with systemic discrimination and the breach of trust that stemmed from the implementation of anti-terrorism laws. We must continue to build our toolbox, and I'm very excited by the work at CRF with the RCMP through the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police on the National Task Force on Hate Crimes, because that will create the national standards we've all been longing for. So through this work, through the efforts that we're putting together to have evidence-based, community-informed expert advice, we will be able to have more and more tools in our toolbox to deal with operational realities. Finally, coming on to this practical guide on anti-Muslim hate, as a strong proponent of human rights cooperation and the guarantee of fundamental freedoms, including freedom of religion, Canada remains a key partner and a key player at the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. In May 2020, following concerns and instances of violent Islamophobic attacks in some participating states, the OSCE published this practical guide on anti-Muslim hate, and it has its sister companion, a practical guide on anti-Semitic hate. And the recommendations are almost carbon copy the same. Why again? Because when we fix gaps for one, we fix gap for all. Informed by government practice at the state level, this guide is ready for launch in all OSCE participating countries tackling anti-Muslim hatred and Islamophobia, and considers all the operational realities faced by law enforcement. And again, I'm very happy that we do have members of the Auto Police Service here. We have Waterloo Regional Police Service, Peel Regional Police Service, and many joining us online as well from police services. The guide itself incorporates some of the recommendations proposed by the National Council of Canadian Muslims in July 2021, including the need for crisis management support for Muslims, the provision of financial resources to support community-based security infrastructure, transparency and openness in policy and practice, greater public awareness and media engagement, and addressing the data and reporting gaps and challenges. And this is directly in my mandate to provide advice to the federal government on how we can better track and monitor instances of anti-Muslim hate crimes. So to conclude, this is all part of a very robust federal approach to tackling Islamophobia. This coming year, we are going to continue to work to strengthen Canada's toolbox, informed by our community members and our community organization, through the provision of expert advice, inclusive consultation, and the use of a human rights and evidence-based approach. To ensure complementarity of efforts, we will make the necessary linkages domestically and internationally to ensure progress and the normative changes required to mend and build our communities across Canada. Pour assurer la complémentarité des efforts,
to make sure that we have a good complement, we will try to make all the links needed at the international and national level in order to have all of the normative changes that is needed for all communities in Canada.
They support one another. This is why Canada is launching the OSCE Practical Guide on Anti-Muslim Hate, to ensure that we are steadfast towards our goal of building a well-rounded toolbox. To achieve successful outcomes, we must all work together to chart a way forward unique to our domestic context. And I look forward to working closely with all of you in the coming months to develop Canada's National Islamophobia Strategy. Thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to today. Thank you.
Thank you, Amira. Now we will introduce the team from the Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, beginning with Rachel Bending, Associate Web Editor, to provide an overview of the organization's work on hate crimes. Rachel will be followed by the special presentation of ODIHR's Practical Guide on Anti-Muslim Hate Crimes by Sabrina Saoudi, Advisor on Combating Intolerance Against Muslims.
Is this working? Okay, good,
Yeah.
Great. Good morning again. My name is Rachel Bending. Thank you very much for the introduction. It really is an honor to be here today, and it's been very, very interesting to listen to your speeches. So thank you for this opportunity to talk more about ODIHR's work, and in particular, the practical guide that Sabrina will be presenting shortly. But I would like to first start with a little explanation of why and how the OSCE works to address anti-Muslim hate crime in the OSCE region. So as Matteo Macacci, the director of ODIHR, mentioned, the OSCE is the world's largest security organization and is comprised of 57 participating states. In the OSCE, we take a comprehensive approach to security, which means that the organization addresses a range of security-related concerns. And it does this working through and with the states by acting as a platform to dialogue and collective actions. OSCE states have acknowledged that human rights and democratic institutions are essential to lasting security. There can be no security without human rights. That is why my office, the Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights of the OSCE, has been tasked to support states and civil society to promote democracy and human rights, including by addressing hate crime and all forms of intolerance. So why in particular hate crime? Why is my office working to address hate crime? OSCE states have recognized the role that hate crime plays in undermining security across the region and recognizes what happens when intolerance and discrimination are left unchecked. The impact of hate crimes go well beyond the direct victims. And I would like to take a moment to reflect here and recognize the fact that as a white British woman who has always lived always been a member of the majority community, I can only try to understand the impact on victims. And you have my full empathy for that. Hate crimes send a message to the communities targeted. They send a message that the communities, the individuals impacted by hate crimes are not welcome. They're neither safe or welcome in society. This, of course, spreads fear and anxiety, and hate crimes damage the social cohesion and can lead to wider conflict. So first and foremost, we acknowledge and wish to address the impact on the victims themselves, but also, as Amira mentioned, addressing the gaps in security for the Muslim community and other communities helps to raise the bar and ensures that other communities are also protected. Because when there are attacks on one community, there are inevitably attacks and emboldening of hatred towards other communities. Of course, it goes without saying that hate crimes pose a serious obstacle to human rights for the victims and their communities and impede their ability to exercise their religious beliefs in public. The impact on the victims themselves is often greater than with other crimes, as victims have been targeted simply for who they are, and victim communities know that they can be targeted simply for who they are at any given moment. This brings me to ODIHR's mandate, the mandate that we've been given by the 57 participating states of the OSCE. We've been tasked by the states to collect and report information and data on hate crime and to train police, prosecutors, and civil society organizations to identify, investigate, prosecute, and monitor hate crimes. We also have developed multiple resources, training programs, and provide tailored assistance for states and civil society. How we do this is we use our convening power, our unique role in building partnerships among states, civil society organizations, and also international organizations. Not only does ODIHR bring its own expertise, but it supports actors working to address hate crimes at all levels in the states to share their experiences and learn from each other's good practices. ODIHR is specifically mandated to work with civil society to this end. We proactively engage civil society through trainings on reporting hate crimes, as I mentioned, and also on providing support to the victims and their communities, and by developing civil society partnerships and coalitions to ensure a more effective and well-rounded response. ODIHR's approach to addressing hate crime is also comprehensive. It recognizes that this task cannot be performed by one actor alone or one institution on its own, or indeed one community on their own. It requires all actors to cooperate towards the same goal. Our approach is, of course, human rights-based and victim-focused, and places the needs and interests of victims and victimized communities at the center of its hate crime training programs and policy guidance. We also highlight gender considerations throughout our trainings and by collecting data on the sex and gender of victims, and by using this information to analyze and strengthen understanding of hate crimes motivated by multiple forms of bias. So ODIHR's hate crime report is published once a year on the 16th of November, and it's a collection of data and information from states, civil society, and other international organizations on hate crime, the hate crime situation in each state. We have a dedicated website, hatecrime.osce.org, and I'm sorry for not having it in a presentation today, but I will share with you in a moment a resource where you'll be able to find more information. We work together with the national points of contact that states have appointed to address hate crime in their states, to collect the official data, information on data collection mechanisms, on victim support, national policies and legislation to address hate crime. And we have these contacts with the states to ensure that we have information to obtain a clearer picture as we can from states of the situation of hate crimes in their countries. But we also work closely with civil society organizations. And I want to explain a little bit about why ODIHR is particularly interested in civil society data and why we collect and publish hate incidents reported by civil society alongside official data. If you go to our website, you will find on the page, the country page for Canada, first official data and information about hate crimes in Canada. And then if you scroll down, you'll find also incidents reported by civil society. Unfortunately, currently, we do not receive as many reports, hate crime reports from civil society in Canada. So we would very much like to increase our cooperation with you and would be very grateful for your help and assistance in reaching out to civil society organizations who do monitor hate crime for us to build our awareness and the awareness of actors in the OSCE and to build on this international and multilateral efforts to address hate crime. But why particular civil society data? So civil society data is really, really important to highlight the gaps in official data. When you have this data side by side, and you see that, for example, the official reporting does not reflect is not reflected in civil society incidents or vice versa, we understand that there are gaps in the reports of hate crimes to police. This is quite often the case that civil society receive reports of hate crime that are not reported to police for a range of reasons. But also civil society are often aware of incidents that were considered maybe too low level to report to the authorities. And this is very important because the lower level incidents, which may not reach the ears of the criminal justice system, provide us with very important information that allows us to identify trends and also pinpoint potential security risks. Also, civil society reports and incidents provide us more details about the individual incidents themselves. They help us understand what happened and what happened from the victim's perspective. This is also key to identifying trends in terms of the context, the timing, and other specific indicators of bias for different bias motivations. Ultimately, more data means we have a better understanding of why, how, and when hate crimes occur. And we are better informed when developing policies to protect the communities. So please do get in touch if you are a representative of civil society or also have contacts with civil society. Please do get in touch to share your data with OSCE ODIHR. And I would like to also reinforce the message that civil society reporting does not interfere with the authorities' efforts to address underreporting and investigate potential hate crimes. But on the contrary, mechanisms for data sharing between police and civil society that I know exist in Canada are an important step towards building trust and protecting the targeted communities. So please let's work together to engage our civil society organizations to help them address hate crime, monitor hate crime, and make this a collective effort. Finally, I would like to mention a little bit what ODIHR can offer Canada, our partners here today, to address hate crime. So we have developed a collection of resources to raise awareness, and here is just one of them. Besides the practical guide, there is here a very short fact sheet that you can find also on our website, osce.org/ODIHR. A fact sheet on hate crime against Muslims, which provides, it's more for public awareness and understanding, providing information, background on the bias indicators to look out for, how to recognize bias-motivated attacks targeting Muslims, but also information on how to report such incidents. So we have numerous publications, resources, and to raise awareness about discrimination, hate crimes, and other forms of intolerance. We also advise on policy, and through the training of law enforcement personnel and educators, we work to build the capacity of governments to prevent and respond to intolerance and discrimination. Two capacity building programs in particular, we have for police and for prosecutors, titled Tackle and PACT. They're acronyms. We do love acronyms in our organization, unfortunately, as you can probably already tell. These capacity building programs can be tailored to the needs, experiences, and hate crime context of each country. So it is not that we're just applying one size fits all to the situation. We undertake needs assessment missions and visits and learn the context, understand the legislation in the country, how hate crimes are recorded by police, and what more, for example, in the case of police, and what more can be done to strengthen their approach and their work. These training programs are designed to be integrated into existing training efforts and to draw on local resources such as national training institutions, police, and prosecutors. Finally, they can be delivered as a training of trainers to maximize beneficiaries and to ensure sustainability. And as I mentioned, we also train civil society organizations to monitor and record hate crime and work with national authorities, including the police, to address hate crime and submit data to ODIHR. On request, ODIHR's legislative experts are able to review and provide recommendations on hate crime legislation. And finally, ODIHR supports states in coordinating their national response to address hate crime by developing interagency cooperation plans. This is an acknowledgement of the fact that this is a comprehensive approach and it requires coordination, communication, and mechanisms for sharing data between different institutions in order to really address the problem. So please do get in touch if you're interested about cooperating with us, and we can identify the areas of Canada's hate crime work that might benefit that might benefit most from ODIHR's assistance. And thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Rachel. I would let Sabrina.
Merci. Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Salam
Hello,
alaikum.
everyone. My name is Sabrina Saoudi. I'm the main counselor on intolerance with ODIHR. I'm the advisor in combating intolerance against Muslims. I will talk in French today because I don't have the chance to do that in other countries. So it's a real pleasure today to be able to talk in both official languages. I would like to thank officially our partners today, and I would like to thank Amira as well as our different partner that supported this project, supported this conference today, and supported us in our objective. When a different person talked earlier today, we're working in 57 states. It's not always an easy task. It's very difficult to provide visibility to Muslim intolerance. So I'm very happy by the work done by our partners with these to offer more visibility into this recurring and growing problem here in Canada.
For my presentation, but happy to discuss further in both languages afterwards. I'd like now to introduce, as we mentioned, our main tool to address intolerance against Muslims, understanding anti-Muslim hate crimes, addressing the security needs of Muslim communities, a practical guide. So this guide is really designed to aid governments in their actions on preventing and combating hate crimes, including by an analysis of security risks and the necessary actions required, with the aim of improving the capacity of the police and other institutions to meet the security needs of Muslim communities and individuals. It also touches on select topics, such as the underreporting and under-recording of hate crimes against Muslims. We've talked a lot about it earlier, and I really hope that we will be able to talk about it through the day, because I think it's a really important point when talking about combating hate crimes. In addition, we set out practical steps that governments can take to address issues of security for Muslim communities, which work in tandem with the efforts within these same communities. Governments have the primary responsibility to provide security to communities and individuals. If I have one key message today, it's this one. The governments have the primary responsibility to provide security to communities and individuals, especially as minority communities often lack the resources to ensure the level of security required. Law enforcement agencies such as the police bear the responsibility for addressing criminal manifestations of intolerance against any individual or community, including anti-Muslim hate crimes. So what's the purpose of this guide? This guide really centers on the practical resources that can be taken by those responsible for dealing with addressing hate crimes and incidents against Muslims, as well as protecting Muslim communities. These are primarily government officials and political representatives, but it is also hoped they are of use to civil society and the broader public as well. So what can governments do concretely? These guides suggest, as I mentioned, 10 practical steps that governments can undertake to respond to anti-Muslim hate crimes and address the security needs of Muslim communities. And I will develop them right away. So the starting point is for governments to acknowledge that intolerance against Muslims is a challenge which poses a threat to security and stability. Without such acknowledgement, there is no problem to be addressed. This starting point can make clear that it is not the responsibility of the Muslim communities to prevent, counter, and address anti-Muslim hate crimes, but it can equally encourage the Muslim communities to come forward and share their concerns. It can also form a basis for a critical review of existing prevention and response mechanisms and propel a discussion on the way forward. It seems obvious, right, that we should acknowledge that there is intolerance against Muslims, but it is not that obvious because nominating a special representative to combat Islamophobia for Canada is a wonderful, wonderful opportunity for Canada. And it's still not, as you know, the same in other participating states. So raising awareness starts really with this kind of fantastic opportunities, such as having someone, a focal point, national focal point, to talk and give visibility to such matter. It is also important to raise awareness of the security issues by helping political leaders, criminal justice officials, civil society, and the wider public to understand anti-Muslim hate crimes and intolerance against Muslims, its adverse impact, and how to challenge it through capacity building and awareness-raising measures. Rachel talked about it earlier. This is also something that we do very much in the 57 participating states. Capacity building, awareness-raising measures, and giving space for dialogue for Muslim communities, political leaders, law enforcement to talk about combating intolerance against Muslims. Often we see that the initial recording of a crime determines the way it is prosecuted. It is therefore important that any anti-Muslim bias motivation is recognized and recorded when investigating and prosecuting criminal acts. There should be systems, routines, and training in place to ensure that relevant officials recognize anti-Muslim hate crimes and record them as such. Lack of data, and I'm sure we will talk about it a lot during through the day. Lack of data is often interpreted as lack of problem. Therefore, it is of paramount importance that governments evidence the security needs by working with the community. in collecting hate crime data. Sharing government and non-governmental data makes it more accurate and allows for a more complete picture. It also addresses underreporting and under-recording. One of the most important factors in ensuring security is building trust between the government and the Muslim communities through consultation, cooperation, and coordination. This should not only be formally institutionalized by virtue of a memorandum of understanding, but most critically achieved through regular personal contact between the authorities and the community representatives. Et encore une fois, je pense effectivement que la nomination d'Amira...
I do believe that Amira's nomination is very important. When I'm talking to Muslim communities in different states, the first thing that comes back on the table is the lack of trust between the police services in the Muslim community. It's very important. We need that trust. Victims will not signal incident. Without trust, victims will not talk to the police officers. They will not receive the support needed. So it is very important to have a consensus, finding a mechanism to establish this trust relation between the Muslim community and the government.
Governments should conduct risk assessments and introduce preventive measures that allow to preempt attacks. These important steps need to be implemented through a collaborative approach so that Muslim communities are included in assessing security risks and preventing attacks. Transparency in sharing information through well-established channels of communication, ensuring that security measures make sense to the community and are informed by their input, conducting and updating threat and risk analysis for the Muslim community's facilities, and using these as a basis for policing are but a few measures that need to be in place for this endeavor to be effective. Another critical step is for the law enforcement to provide protection to the Muslim communities and sites, including during special events. Votre directeur exécutif de la Fondation canadienne
Your director, executive director for the Racial Relations Foundation was saying how important, and Amira also was saying how important that Jewish communities have taken the means and the measures and have taken the habit of organizing themselves in order to find a way to secure their sites. And this is also very important for the Muslim community to do so, and authorities and police services must find a way to secure sites.
Potential targets, of course, such as a halal supermarket or restaurants, ordering police to regularly patrol sites such as mosques, Islamic cultural centers or cemeteries, but also providing financial resources that can help address the security needs of the Muslim communities. For example, to find a security guard or to install security equipment. Government representatives should also work with the Muslim communities to set up crisis management systems by actively taking part in workshops and awareness-raising events designed to increase the capacity of the communities to respond to an attack. Reassuring the community in case of an attack. In the unfortunate case of an attack, government officials and political representatives have a responsibility to issue a press or social media statement condemning the anti-Muslim attack. They can also visit the Muslim community, take part in a service or commemorative ceremony, order increased police protection and patrols in order to send a message of reassurance to the community. Finally, providing support to the victims of anti-Muslim attacks needs to be nuanced. Sometimes psychological support may be sufficient and law enforcement's involvement may not be needed. And those who provide support to victims need to be trained on specific needs of the Muslim communities. So in a nutshell, this is the step model, which could be summarized as follows. The primary responsibility of ensuring the security of the Muslim communities rests with the governments, but all steps enumerated should be undertaken in consultation, cooperation, and coordination with the Muslim communities. That's a lot of information, but I really hope that I've made clear why this guide is so important, as well as the multitude ways that it seeks to bolster governmental and civil society response to anti-Muslim hate crimes. Il est parfois, lorsque je parle de ces...
When I talk about these important steps, sometimes you might think that I am stating the obvious, but nevertheless, these are steps that are frequently forgotten. It's important to remind everyone of them, even if it seems completely obvious to remind you of these things. But today, Muslim communities are asking us for this sort of thing because there is no communication between police services and the Muslim communities, and there is no support, or at least they feel that there is no support that they are entitled to after an attack.
Key principles that should underpin governmental policies and initiatives in this area. I will not go through all of them, but we'll highlight the key areas, such as the participating states' approaches should be first and foremost rights-based, victim-focused, non-discriminatory, gender-sensitive, and holistic. Merci beaucoup pour votre attention.
Thank you so much for your attention. We are very happy to accept your questions if you have questions to ask. What's important for me here today and during this conference and the next few sessions is to also hear your feedback on this presentation, and also how you feel about these steps that are proposed, and how do you think that this guide will help you in your communities, locally or regionally, deal with these issues, and what do you think are the most important steps, and what could be of help to your community? What there are many steps that won't necessarily work in Canada, and Rachel and I explained to you our training, and how can we very practically help you today. Thank you.
Merci, Rachel.
Thank you, Rachel and Sabrina.
One or two questions, if you want so. So if anyone wants to make a comment. Yes. There's a microphone here, Ashley. Say hi to my colleague from Montreal.
As Bashra said, I'm her colleague from the Montreal Police Department, and we do have a hate crimes unit that investigates hate crimes, and we also investigate hate incidents. And what we're seeing with civil societies now, they're willing to have them report hate incidents, but we want to know our question or our interrogation in regards to civil societies taking in hate incidents is what happens when it's actually a hate crime. How is the follow-up done so that the investigation can be done by the police force? Is it something that you've seen?
So I think what this depends on is ensuring there is a third-party reporting mechanism so that there is a way for the civil society to report the incidents that they gather, and when it's suspected that there is this is an affair criminal offence, then the police can use this information, depending obviously on the data protection of the victim and the arrangements. So this has to be established through a mechanism, a formal mechanism for data sharing. But it is possible, it is done in other participating states. So we would encourage, it's great to have the incidents included as well, because it means that, you know, this is also on the radar, that this information is being publicly curated. But it's also, obviously, as you mentioned, it's important that incidents that may reach the threshold of a criminal offence are also investigated and prosecuted as needed.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. Do we have another question, comment? Yes, please.
Thank you for the presentation. Super interesting. Mike Sousa at the Department of Justice. New in the policy area for the Department of Justice. But of course, as a layperson, always knew about underreporting in various different situations. Underrecording is something relatively new for me. And it seems like to be a big part of the guide and the conversations that we're having, and so important to get to root causes and to get that data, because the data will be the roadmap to find some of those solutions. Are there other racialized groups where we see underreporting, and are there any lessons learned there for us? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I can also speak to that, actually. I think especially in Canada, Indigenous groups, they're certainly underreporting. I personally edit and review all the incidents submitted by civil society. I'm not sure about the data reported by police, whether we have a breakdown of those figures which target the Indigenous community, of crimes targeting the Indigenous community, but there have been very, very, very few reports mentioning incidents that relate to members of the Indigenous community. So I would really like to see more. I not like to see, and obviously it's a terrible thing, but we want to make sure that we are receiving those reports so we can have a fuller picture and understanding, and also support that and have that as an advocacy tool for civil society and for other actors in Canada to use towards your work. So this is also why we do our work to compile and make sure that it's available. So yes, Indigenous communities would be one in Canada in particular. I think also, relatively speaking, we don't receive many incidents relating to the LGBTI community. So that would also be something that to look into. Thank you.
Thank you both for your questions. Of course, we will also have the time to ask other questions after the workshop and, of course, this afternoon. So thank you, Rachel and Sabrina. That concludes the first half of our special hybrid presentation. We will be back at 11:30 with a fascinating panel presentation with the Honorable Senator Salma Attaoulajan. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Attaoulajan, Peel Police Inspector Firas Ismail, Edmonton Constable Amal Abdi, and NCCM CEO Stephen Brown. You can stretch your leg, and please, you can follow the guides. They will guide you to the place where are the refreshments. So see you at 11:30. So welcome back, everyone. It's my pleasure to now introduce you to our panelists and dive into our panel discussion on models of cooperation and best shared practices to combat anti-Muslim hatred. Now let me introduce this esteemed panel. So the Honorable Senator Police's Community Safety and Wellbeing Services, and is also a member of the National Task Force on Hate Crimes, currently chaired by the RCMP and the Fondation Canadienne des Relations Raciales. Constable Amal Abdi is Canada's first Somali Canadian female police officer. And Stephen Brown is the CEO of the National Council of Canadian Muslims. So welcome. Thank you for being with us this morning. And we'll begin with an opening from each panelist. I will give them 2 minutes each, and we'll launch into the conversation just after that. So maybe we can start with Mr. Ismail.
Good morning, everybody. I'd like to start off by obviously thanking Amira and her team for inviting us and giving us an opportunity to be up here. I know personally representing Pure Regional Police and so many members of law enforcement in particular who are so passionate and care about these issues. Hate, bias, and extremism is near and dear to a lot of us. And I know I can't speak on the behalf of the collective, but the truth is it's a subtle reminder that many of us come from different backgrounds, different parts of the world. And when that workday ends, we go right back into the community and we are impacted in the same way that our community members are when it comes to these issues. And so for a lot of us that get into this space, and I can share with you on a personal level, having grown up in a Muslim home as an immigrant to this country of Palestinian descent, these issues were very near and dear to me. And in fact, it was that drive that, brought me into the service to the community. That's what drove me into this work. So just to kind of back end that, to be here and to be sitting in front of all of you and be able to actually speak and let you know a little bit about some of the work that we're doing in this space and how important it is. I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge and that you've created an opportunity for another guide and something that can go out there and help law enforcement better understand these particular issues when it comes to our Muslim community is so important, because it is, again, another foundational piece that's going to help us better understand how to deal with these issues. There's a host of topics, obviously, that are covered here, but I just wanted to say on the behalf of our organization, just to thank you. And hopefully, as we kind of navigate these conversations, we'll let you know a little bit more about the work that we're doing and that we hope to do in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Inspector. Maybe Amal Abdi, if you can share with us an introduction.
Hello. Thank you very much for having me here. It's a privilege to be here. And as well as just to echo exactly what the inspector here said, is I'm so happy to be here, talk about this. I do believe that this is a very important topic. As myself as well, I grew up in a Muslim family and in the Muslim community. So this is definitely near and dear to my heart. My family members wear the hijab, are visible. And so when things happen, it definitely does have an effect, not only on me, but the entire community. So I'm a constable. So I've been a constable for the last 8 years, going into my 9th year. And the importance of having law enforcement and community be in like build those relationships are so important, just because as we said, like the community needs to have trust in the police force for them to be heard, or to be felt like they're heard and acknowledged and validated. And so I always say, which is funny enough, I was reading the guide, I always say that the police force should be a representative of the community it serves. And so I'm a big advocate, and I'm a big advocate for our community, and I'm very glad and happy that I can be a voice for them within the law enforcement. And so yeah, that's just about me.
Thank you. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. And I want to thank you, Amira, for giving me this opportunity to speak about some of the work that I have done. But before I do that, I'd like to introduce myself. Salma Tawla Jan, born in Pakistan, immigrated to Canada, and I'm the first senator of Canadian Pakistani origin. A chair of the Human Rights Committee. When I found out last year that the most Muslims killed in a G7 country was Canada, believe me, I was shocked, as most people are when I tell them that. And I decided I need to do something about it. So we launched into a year-long study on Islamophobia. I knew it existed, but I didn't realize it was that bad. When we were in Edmonton and we were speaking to young women, young Black women who were wearing the hijab, during their testimony, many of us, we were teary-eyed. We couldn't believe what they had to go through. So I'm just going to briefly go through some of the points we heard. So just to make sure that I get them correct, I'm just going to read them out. So we spent, I said, a year, and we heard from experts, academics, community members, and leaders, as well as government representatives to better grasp the extent of anti-Muslim hate in our country. We traveled to Toronto, we traveled to Vancouver, we traveled to Edmonton, and we ended in Quebec City. We couldn't go to the East because of funds, because there's limitations on us, but we did do Zoom calls with them. We had 138 witnesses, but everywhere we went in the mosques, we made sure we met the community. We met students, we went to schools. We just talked to some NGOs. We made sure that I was very keen that we talked to everyone. And we made sure we'd go to, a Sunni mosque, a Shia mosque, and, went and spoke to the Ismaili community. We spoke to, the Ahmadiyya community. We made sure that we covered everyone. So we heard the testimony on a wide range of issues: online and offline violence against women, gender discrimination, discrimination in the workplace, Islamophobia in the federal public service,
We also heard about the sources of Islamophobia and its impact on Canadian Muslims, including mental health and physical safety. This was not an easy study, as many shared heartbreaking stories of feeling othered, unsafe in their own neighborhoods, and even to go home. And I think the most difficult part was when we went to the Quebec City Mosque and we were shown where the bodies lay as they were shot, and how the gun jammed when he tried to shoot the 9-year-old daughter of the Imam, and how they have struggled since. We're planning on releasing this study sometime in October. We're looking at the second draft, October being Islamic Heritage Month. I had my first, I would say, incident of Islamophobia with my child when she was in grade 5, and it was November and they were cutting poppies. And my 10, 11-year-old daughter was told, "Why you want to kill us? You're Taliban, why are you cutting poppies?" She had no clue what that meant. She's Canadian, born in Canada, and that's the only home she knows. She came home crying, and because she told the boy, "Shut up." So she got into trouble, but nothing was said to the boy. Well, I'm not one of those mothers who takes anything sitting down. I was in the school and I said, listen, I spoke to her, I spoke to the principal, and I said, are you going to do anything about it, or should I be going to the school board? I think that was I'm a Pushtun woman, and those of you who know, we're fighters. And just on a sideline, the boy who called her Taliban, he's in prison for trafficking, and my daughter is a lawyer. So yeah. So anyway, I look forward to engaging with you and talking more about our study. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Stephen?
Oui, salut, bonjour tout le monde. Hello, good morning.
Hello, everyone.
I'm the CEO of the National Council of Canadian Muslims. For those who don't know NCCM, we're an organization that's dedicated to combating Islamophobia and advocating for the interests of the Canadian Muslim community. The many different sort of hats that our organization wears, one of them, a major part of it, is actually the legal work that we do. So you may have seen us in such acts as, suing the Quebec government for Bill 21, right? But it's not just, large structural issues. We also get hundreds of complaints and flags of hate crimes a year from the Muslim community. So this is an issue that's not only qui nous préoccupe, not only that, is part of our daily bread and butter of what we do, but it's also something I think that's kind of like a canary in the coal mine. That gives a sense of what is it like for Canadian Muslims to live day to day, and what are some of the major challenges that they're facing. So, on this particular issue, the relationship between the Canadian Muslim community and law enforcement, if we're being quite frank, has not always been easy. And the fact that the Canadian Muslim community, as other minority communities, are seeing increasing levels of hate crimes means that this is an issue that we have to get right. So I'm happy for the opportunity to speak here today. And, we're very interested to see how the results of this conference and the steps that we're going to be taking as civil society and government as we move forward to tackle this issue. Merci beaucoup. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. So we have representative to show how it's a multi-scale issue. I'll start with the Senator. Can you share with us what were some of the common challenges you heard from members of Muslim communities when it came to reporting hate crimes and incident to local police? So what did you hear?
It was very similar from coast to coast to coast. Muslims didn't feel comfortable reporting the crimes. And we heard testimony that only 1% of hate crimes are reported. And we heard stories like the mother in Quebec who was being, what's a polite way? She was with her children in the grocery store, and somebody was directing really horrible comments at her, being very Islamophobic. And when she called in the complaint, the police wouldn't register a complaint. And she argued with him back and forth for 45 minutes. And then he said, he charged the other woman, but he told her she has to go to court to pay the costs also. Consistently, we heard in Edmonton that when they report what's happened to them, because in Edmonton, we heard some of the most horrible stories of women having coffee thrown on them, being kicked to the ground, and name calling, was almost like a daily sort of experience for them. The police wouldn't do anything. And this is a question I can continue to ask, is that what would it take for you to call this a hate crime? Because we know if it's called a hate crime, then, when they go to court, the sentence would be longer. For example, when somebody tried to drive the car through the gates to kill some Muslims, he basically wanted to kill Muslims. And I mean, they shut the gate. Why wasn't he charged with a hate crime? When somebody tries to run a family of Muslims down in a parking lot, why are they not being charged with a hate crime? So we struggled with this. We did have, as witnesses, we had the RCMP, we had CSIS, we had border services, we had all of them. And these were all the questions that we put to them. And I wasn't satisfied with anybody's answer. I don't know why why the police are hesitant. Do we need to strengthen the laws? What do we need to do? Because certain times it was very clearly a hate crime, but yet they weren't. So the result is that people don't feel comfortable going and talking to the police and reporting their crimes, and they're underreported. And we heard, that 1% of them, it's being reported. So, and I personally think also that in private conversations with people in mosques, when they say this happened to me or this happened to my child, did you go and tell the police? And they would say no, because they will not do anything.
Thank you, Senator. Constable Abdi. In Edmonton, there was a terrible rush of attacks on Muslim women between 20 and 21, particularly targeting Black Muslim women. What have been some of the specific learnings that you have made, especially with regard to police training?
That's a very good question. I can't speak for the organization has definitely learned a lot from that experience. We actually, Edmonton Police Service has just in June rolled out the online reporting, just because when that incident happened, I actually did go to quite a few mosques. I went to quite a few community gatherings, and the consistency was that they didn't feel comfortable reporting, and they didn't feel like they would be validated by the officer that attended their scene. And there would be an example, and it would be heartbreaking, because that's something you don't want to hear. You would hope to think that your colleagues are giving them the utmost service. And so when one person has a bad experience, unfortunately, they share that amongst everyone, and then makes other people not want to share their story. For me, I'm always trying to just reiterate, like, you need to report, whether it is a hate incident or a hate crime. I think that they're equally important to report to police. And so what we found with EPS is that the online reporting, even though they believed it to be a hate incident, and they reported, I think there was like 80 reports, and I think out of that 80, 12 were actually criminal. And then therefore our hate unit crime was able to investigate identified suspects and follow through with that investigation, which I think is definitely a step in the right direction for us.
Thank you. Inspector Ismail, one of the practical steps in the guide is reassuring the community if an attack takes place. Tell us how the reassurance protocol you have helped develop has improved the relationship between the Peel Police and the wider community, and how you hope to see it adopted, let's say, nationally first.
Thank you very much for that question. And on the concept of reassurance, Senator, hearing you speak and understanding foundationally that many of these issues stem from the fact that historically, perhaps the police may not have understood, the impact and the broader, feelings of fear that manifest through communities based on sometimes a single incident that impacts an individual. And as an organization, I can tell you that, we've been blessed. We serve one of the most diverse communities in North America in Peel, for those of you that don't understand or may not know the diaspora. So we have for many years really worked hard to develop a lot of those relationships with members of our community from a variety of different faiths and cultures and ethnicities to really help strengthen and really better our capacity and understanding of these issues. When it comes to reassurance, one thing I'm happy to share with you here as an organization, back in 2016-17, we really worked very closely with our Muslim community at the height of Daesh and a lot of their rhetoric that was being basically propagated through social media and really how international issues had such an impact on our diaspora because Islamophobia was real and it was happening. And we would sit and meet with our Muslim communities and they would express openly to us because we'd had that, foundation of trust where we could have those conversations right from the top down because leadership matters. And we heard from them that, look, we do not feel that, these things are taken seriously. We don't know if your officers and members really understand the impact that this has. And we are often hesitant to report these incidents. One, because we fear repercussions and retaliation from the members that we may report to. Two, because the police may not understand it. Some said that they felt that, they didn't want to waste the police's time since they understood it didn't meet a criminal threshold. And as we kind of learned and understood this, we decided, it's something we needed to be done. So as an organization, 2017, 2018, we actually operationalized our reassurance protocol. At the time, I believe the first of its kind in that it mandated that one, there is no discretion when it comes to the reports of hate crimes. All our officers, if anybody reports a hate crime or incident, that immediately gets documented and investigated thoroughly. Those reports then make our way to our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Bureau, which at Peel Police serves as our Hate Crime Policy Center. And at that time, what we would do is we would go through those to make sure that all the important information was there, that it was labeled correctly. And the reassurance protocol would then indicate that within 48 to 72 hours, we, as members of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Bureau, would connect with every single person who called the police about an incident or a crime. We would connect with them personally. We would, by way of a voluntary context, offer them wraparound supports. We'd connect with a variety of other social service providers and partners that have a culturally responsive victim-centric lens. Above and beyond victim services, we're still building that cadre of partners that we're working with. We have nasiha.org, which has been an incredible ally with us for some time now. And so by virtue of that connection with these folks, what we're doing is we're actually expressing to them, not just symbolically, but in reality, look, we know that these awful but lawful things are happening. And we know that there's only so much we can do when it comes to the criminal element, because if there's a chance to lay a charge, we will lay a charge if the evidence exists. But we also understand, and by way of kind of connecting with you, we're letting you know that we don't condone this behavior, that we're doing everything that we can to support you beyond that. We've seen an uptick in the reporting of incidents over the years because of that relationship that we've had with the community. And I'm happy to say that, again, leadership matters. I mean, I have with me here Superintendent Abby Chinzer, Deputy Chief DePat, that are here, sitting here supporting this because they know how important this is to our organization. But leadership matters at the national level as well. I've been blessed to sit on the National Hate Crime Task Force. Mr. Mohammed Hashim and Deputy Minister, Alison Whalen have been incredible leaders in moving this up, and we are now actually upscaling this model and hoping that it actually gets operationalized and there's a convincing ask to every service in the country to adopt something similar, because it works, because that's how you start to kind of move in this space. We have to evolve, we have to be able to learn from each other, and we have to be able to move in the right space. And the one last thing I'll mention is, when we talk about being able to share these stories, this is why I'm so blessed to be able to sit up here and be able to share as humbly as we can about the work we're doing, because we've made some mistakes along the way and we're learning every day, right? I think humility is key, and I think we have to check our egos. But when we talk about the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police, our Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee that I sit on, we created a hate crime guidebook that again helped other organizations better understand the impacts of hate, but we also named in there some best practices, and reassurance was one of them. Some of the incredible work being done at Waterloo Police was another one, and Halton Police and York Police. And again, by sharing that, what we're doing is we're letting you know, hey, there are things that you can do, simple things that are cost effective, that can be done to really help deal with this issue. And so it's really just about getting that information out there and hoping to kind of mobilize in the right way. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Stephen, what are some of the key policies that you hope the federal government, along with local law enforcement, adopt to help communities feel safer?
Yeah, thanks, Bushra. That's a really interesting question. I think important question. I think one thing that we see oftentimes in our work, and I can just go back to something that Selma said, underreporting, and then also from the community, and also in many cases, the police refusal to actually even investigate something as a hate crime is a major issue. And there are different best practices that we see across police forces across the country, but the real issue comes down to what happens when the police force or the police officer in question doesn't actually follow them. So really, like a big part of our job is in dealing with hate crime cases, whether it's our government relations department or our legal department, our in-house lawyers, is actually quite, I'll be frank, pushing the police to do their job. Like, I'll give an example. Okay, there was a Muslim woman recently who was shopping in Walmart, and then some guy said something to her when she was on an elevator, and she turned around. I punched her in the face. She fell down the escalator, had a concussion, right? Like broad daylight in Walmart, right? Contacted us. The lawyer who was on the case probably spent 2 months pushing the police officers to actually investigate this as a hate crime. Didn't catch the guy, didn't know who he was, right? It wasn't until we actually went and put it in the media, and then our government relations department got involved, then all of a sudden, okay, well, yeah, the officer, and we found out, oh, the officer who was looking at the case, he went on vacation, right? So it's out on his desk for a month, didn't do anything about it, went on vacation. And it's only when we made a big deal out of it. So, so that's one issue. The other issue is also like, what are the tools that police have in order to actually, prosecute people for hate crimes, right? So, there's a few major asks that we have. One, freestanding provision in the criminal code around hate motivated assaults. Right now, many people don't know the AG actually needs to give their consent in order to file charges for hate crimes, which is a standard that is very, very difficult. And in many cases may dissuade the police from even looking into it. To instituting a provincial hate crimes accountability unit in all provinces, making hate crime accountability units responsible for providing guidance on appropriate penalties for police officers who discourage reporting, because unfortunately that is something that we often see. In this case, 2 police officers, discouraged the woman in question from filing charges. And then there was the Tulich report. So we're recommending that all provinces adopt that. And then through hate crimes accountability unit that we recommend, really building out methodologies for third-party reporting. I'll say one last thing as well. In Canada, we have, multiculturalism is an official part of the structure of this nation. So in many cases, we're far ahead of where Europe is. I mean, I also have another citizenship. I'm French, right? We're way ahead of what France is doing, and in many cases what Europe is doing. In just even using the term Islamophobia in Europe is controversial, and if you read the report, the term Islamophobia isn't even there. So in terms of the standards that we need in order to make sure that police officers are doing their job when it comes to protecting members of the Muslim community and aren't using connection with the Muslim community as a pretext for spying on the Muslim community, which, like, let's be quite frank, is something that we have seen in many cases. So we need also a made in Canada, right? Guide, tailored solution to have real tangible results. And we also need to be looking at policy questions, because having best practices is good, but for a country like ours that enshrines multiculturalism as a fundamental aspect of our nation, the base has to be measures to ensure that best practices are being carried through and being followed. So we have more recommendations. Amira, many people in this room were part of the summit on Islamophobia that took place a couple of years ago, but I'd say on this particular issue, those would be the main ones for now. That would be like a base minimum. Yeah.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you so much. Online from London Police Service, Sergeant Ziad Zabian is joining us. Sergeant Zabian, we know London's Muslim. So are we hearing him? Yes, okay.
You can hear me.
Now I see you. Mr. Zabian, we know London's Muslims are going through a lot with the trial right now. What has been the learning that police have taken away from the tragic attack on the Afzal family?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for having me. Thanks to all the organizers and all the panel guests. And I absolutely agree with everything that they've said. With the London attack, this was the worst act of mass murder our city's ever experienced. And there's a lot of challenges and learning lessons we experienced from start to finish and today as well. One of the lessons, very important lessons we learned was with our communities. If we did not have that foundation of trust and partnership with the communities, we would not have had the success and support to handle this case from start to finish. And that included meetings right after this event happened. We did something that was a little unprecedented, where we had a meeting the following morning of this act of murder and terror. And we told our community with all the leaders there what actually happened. And that was the foundation that built that trust moving forward to where we are today. With the trial, it's impacting our community significantly right now because they're hearing evidence that they weren't privy to. That's very disturbing. And we are doing a weekly meeting with our community leaders through HICMA and other organizations, helping deal with the mental health challenges associated with our witnesses, our victims, our community, of what they're going through, and ensuring they have supports in place by our community services. Those are just some of the things that we've been doing. And one important part, the reassurance policy that Inspector Ishmael was talking about, excellent strategy. We've implemented that here in London. And another thing that we are working closely on is a third-party reporting. That's been a huge challenge, as all the panelists have confirmed. It's been a challenge to get our Muslim community members and other faith-based members to report these acts of these incidences. When dealing with newcomers, they have a lot of mistrust with police, and it takes months, even years, to get through those that mistrust, to build that trust, those communities. And that's why we're working on hopefully getting a third-party agency, trusted community center through our Muslim community. When those hate instances and those hate crimes come forward, they will report it to them, and that gets forwarded to us. So that's something we're working on. I think that will be a fantastic solution to help this challenge. As with, I think, a few of the panelists mentioned, getting them to report these instances has been a huge challenge. One of the biggest challenges with our communities is understanding the hate incidents and the hate crimes. I've had for the last year, that's what I've been explaining to our potential victims. And that's where we get complaints as police officers, because the victims feel nothing has been done about these hate incidents. They feel they've been victimized, but it doesn't fit the threshold of a crime. So that's where it's vital and important for us to follow up with that educational dialogue to explain that. So those are just some of the learning points we've been going through. And we've also set up our courthouse to have, as you guys know, this case was moved to Windsor. So we've had our courtroom set up, like a few rooms for our Muslim community with a prayer room to ensure everything's done as respectful as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergeant Zabian. In the audience, we are pleased to have the Deputy Commissioner of the Ontario Provincial Police, Carrie Dart. Deputy Commissioner Dart, would you have some reflections to share about some of the discussion so far?
Me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. As an organization, we are making some significant strides with the creation of a brand new command for the Ontario Provincial Police called Culture and Strategy, where we are investing in both the leadership that's required to respond and make the necessary changes and evolution that our organization needs to participate in, as well as what our communities actually deserve of us. So we are very, very much actively pursuing some of these changes. One of the reflections that I must share is just the consistent theme of community engagement. And we cannot do this alone. And it does take all of us together in both public and private sector based agencies to be able to combat and tackle and tackle these issues and these problems because they are real and they are hurtful and they do not deserve a place in our province or our country. And having opportunities to work with other organizations. Thank you, sir, for your participation and representing Peel here today. I know that we also have a very healthy working relationship with you and we are learning from each other in that space. Something that the OPP have started is in January, I think this was relatively new to our organization, is a multifaceted advisory group. And we are seeing the benefits of having advisory groups that are multi-faith based, however, are sharing very similar experiences, and the commonalities are profound between and amongst these communities. And as a police leader, we recognize our responsibilities is to very much be in touch and hear from our community so that we can make the necessary changes. So again, we are so pleased to be here. The guide is going to be incredibly important for us, and our organization is already looking at some of the recommendations in the guide. So thank you for your work.
Thank you. I'll turn it over to Yunus Imam from the Salam Project, who is in the audience, to share his reflections on the challenges he has heard from mosque leaders about safety. And then we will have enough time for questions and to hear also from... Oh, you want to come here?
Hey, assalamu alaikum, everybody. One second. So we call it the Salam Project because we feel that the best security that can be built in a community is by just saying hello to one another, right? So I want to talk a little bit about some of the issues that different mosques have faced in the last few months, right? We've obviously had things like a mosque being set on fire and, it being reported to the police, and then the police just taking that report and just not further investigating, right? We've had people walking in, men wearing niqabs, the face covering, into women's sections, conducting surveillance at multiple mosques in almost every province. This is something that happens very regularly, right? These things get reported, and as the amazing panelists have talked about already, a lot of times they're not taken seriously. The other thing that a key challenge that they face is the security infrastructure program. Now, it's amazing that this program exists, right? To have that much money available for different mosques. But the truth is that it's the way that the application process is done, it's largely inaccessible. We've had mosques where people have died on the front steps and they still can't apply for the grant, right? And making it more accessible is just one of those key things that could really make a big difference to all of these different institutions, right? Now, the other thing that I wanted to cover is that, kind of the source of this Islamophobia, hate, right? The truth is that unfortunately within Canadian society, if there's decades of disinformation and misinformation about, oh yeah, we're all on, a slippery slope to Al-Qaeda, Taliban, ISIS, right? If that information keeps getting repeated in the media with certain politicians and certain other groups, well, guess what? The average Canadian is going to believe that, hey, guess what? Islam naturally leads to these things, right? And you can look at all the Angus Reid surveys and polls. I'm sure some people here are familiar with that today, some of the data that's been released about how many Canadians actually feel that, oh, Islam is actually a very damaging religion to Canadian public life. I want to thank everybody for inviting me today, Sister Amira specifically, and I just want to appreciate the efforts of the Canadian Race Relations Foundation and especially NCCM. To be honest with you, I report everything to them. So they kind of solve all the problems for the Muslim community, mashallah. Right. But thank you very much for your time. And I do want to appreciate all the work by the police agencies and the federal government in, even getting this far, which is incredible. Thank you.
Thank you. Is Oswa, do we have online questions? Thank you.
I'll be reading out a bunch of online questions we've gotten. I'm going to summarize them to save time because we've got a few. York Region Muslims, as well as the Coalition of Muslim Women of KW, both have a similar question around how grassroots communities representing a diversity of Muslims can bridge trust between the community and police agencies, because they've seen that as a large barrier to reporting hate crimes and hate incidents. So that's the first question.
Mr. Ismail?
Thank you for that question from our folks online. I think those partnerships, and I think are really the foundation. If there are grassroots organizations that represent a Muslim community, and if in fact they can find a connection with the respective police service, and I think we sometimes forget, we say police service, it's individuals, right? You need to connect with the people. So I met Amal a little while ago, and I talking to Amal for a few minutes, I realized, oh my goodness, how lucky is Edmonton to have you, because that's the type of person that needs to go into the communities to help break down those barriers and to really help have these honest conversations. And I think you need to find, if I'm going to be candid, members within each respective service that actually have those soft skills, that are able to be comfortable in uncomfortable conversations. And that's not every single officer. And I think, at some point we need to just, stop. It becomes such a robotic thing, it's just a service and there's an individual, but, let's find the right people that can go in there, that can help break those, that can really stimulate those conversations, that can help build a foundation of trust. And then, and we had these conversations. I know that I've been so blessed. I'll give you an example. In my organization, my career in policing, I'm in my 22nd now, really started in an operational context for many years. And then as I kind of got more into the community, when I could be out into the community, when some of that work was done, those relationships that I established back then, 7, 8, 9 years ago, dealing with these particular issues as, let's say, the Sergeant of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, really going out and connecting and doing hate crime presentations. That's when I met Mr. Muhammad Hashim, who's from the region, and we would have honest conversations about certain files. Those relationships still exist today, regardless of where I go and where I work. Ask anybody that knows me. It's my phone that's ringing, and I'm the one that's now creating the connection between these folks and the people within our organization that can help them today. This is about relationships, not with a service, but rather with individuals within that service that can speak and that can lobby for, and that could hopefully one day move up, that, hierarchical chain to impact broader change. And I think it has to start somewhere. So, I think it's really finding the right person and finding that commonality, and then being able to really take that, leverage it, and move forward.
Constable Abdi, do you want to share a reflection?
Yeah, I think Sir got pretty much nailed. Was exactly what he said. I definitely do connect with those grassroots communities, just because I am a part of that community, right? So I am a part of that community, and I'm also a part of the law enforcement community. And so for me, bridging that gap is one of the most important aspects of my career. And one of the reasons I did want to become a police officer is to be that voice for those grassroots communities. And so luckily in my city, I believe majority of the grassroots communities are able to reach out to me and are able to have those conversations. And you know what? I want to be at the table. I want to have a seat at that table. I want to be able to bring back, and that's why I'm here today, is to learn from everyone here and learn from other police agencies, what they're doing like this. I didn't know about the reassurance policy. That's an amazing a policy that I'm more than happy to bring back to my organization. And so I think it's just a continuous of bridging that gap, building those relationships, and just educating ourselves from both sides, right? As the sergeant was saying, Ziad was saying about the just information of knowing and letting the community know the difference between hate incidents and hate crime. And so, and just letting our community know that we're not failing them, we're just trying to navigate the system all together. And so I truly believe that that's a very important aspect of it.
I wanted to share a personal anecdote. I was working with the 911 service at the Service de Police de la Ville de Montréal. And when I share the existence of our unit, like the entire hate and incident unit, I would say the majority of the room was not aware of the existence of it. So what I want to share here is that we sometimes, as cities and police services, we create those really impressive and interesting units, but we also need all our services and all our colleagues to know about it. And I was honestly shocked. But now our colleagues know about it. So it's also a way to faire de la sensibilisation like all day long to our colleagues. I think do we have other questions from the online audience? Okay, so we'll take one or two. Yes. Can you come to the...
Good afternoon. I'm Geraldine Stafford from Waterloo Regional Police. One of the things I really, one of the things, I really was interested in coming here to learn and to maybe validate some of my thinking is, one, all the great work individually we're doing. And when I hear hate incident numbers as, this city has calculated 170 for the year, this city has calculated 140. So around that less than 200 mark is what I'm hearing for incidents. Imagine if we times that by all of Canada, all of the cities collecting, and that's the data we're bringing to government. Right? Because everybody's doing great work. Like I heard Stephen, the amazing number, Peel, the number of incidents, because we're doing the work to track the incidents, because I think we've all got the point that it's not the crimes that's the tip of the iceberg, somebody said this morning, right? It's those incidences. And if we're all doing this work, like I just think we need to come together and bring those incidents to the forefront. Right? We've got third-party reporting, which is extremely important. We've got reporting directly to the police. So again, even the third parties within cities that are collecting, where is all that data going in an aggregate? Stats Canada is the one responsible for reporting hate crimes, collecting it from police. I think Waterloo Region is 92 or 94 crimes for the year from 2021 to 2022. Like we know that's the tip of the iceberg. We collect incidents at Waterloo Regional Police, and for the year we're at 143 incidences. So imagine again that 143 times every municipality, every city, every town, and that is the data that's being reported to Stats Canada.
You're right. It was not a question, but a real important proposition. Yes, can you come to the microphone?
Hello, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Ahmed Hatia. I'm on the Peel Police Services Board. The previous speaker spoke about connected hate crimes to a larger issue of disinformation, misinformation, and what is commonly referred to as an Islamophobia network or industry that is spreading false information about Muslims. And so hate crimes can't necessarily be treated as statistics, isolated incidents. What are law enforcement agencies doing, not only to train the understanding of their officers on this larger picture, but also themselves investigating these Islamophobia industries? The Afzal family, the Quebec City shooting, these were not isolated incidents. These were individuals who were influenced by information that they were exposed to. And so what are law enforcement doing to understand this better? Thank you.
Mr. Ismail.
Thank you, sir. It's a very good question. And I know that there is inconsistencies at the national level when it comes to training. So I'll start with that. And I certainly would never get up and speak on the behalf of that perspective, because I know there are pockets and I know that it's an emerging issue. I know there are some rural pockets and services that just don't have the capacity where these issues are still new to them. And I know because they've come to us, because it's been something we've been dealing for a while for conversations to see how they can build that. I can tell you that I can speak, to some degree at a provincial level, but I'll start with Peel. I know that all of our members receive hate crime training. It starts from their hiring processes. They get kind of a fundamentals of hate crimes, incidents, and of course we talk about sections 318, 319. And to your point, Stephen, I know it complicates the issue when we need MEG approval for two of those charges to be able to proceed and move forward, and the preparation of complex briefs, and it's quite a nuanced piece. And the reality is over 90% of our hate crime charges are in fact regular crimes, assaults, threatenings that wholly or in part are supported by evidence to suggest that they are motivated by hate, and that's when 718.2 applies as standard. I know there's some work being done on that. But these are some of this is how nuanced we get with the conversations with our members as an organization, because the reality is our frontline members are collecting, they're the ones that are responding firsthand. We've now made sure that every time that they get a report that they obviously, put into an investigative kind of process. And then we actually have specialized trained officers who are hate crime coordinators at Peel Police that are within each of our divisional investigative bureaus that would then take the more complex cases and follow through with them. So from a training perspective, there's that at the internal level that is happening. I can tell you that we've helped co-develop an advanced hate crime training course, which is now accredited by Solgen. It is being delivered by the Ontario Police College. The waiting list for that is so huge that we've actually had to take that show on the road, and some of us that speak at that and help develop it are now traveling the country trying to get that messaging out. That's a 5-day accredited course that touch on the complex cases. A part of those conversations, we talk about the nexus between hate crimes and violent extremism. We bring in victims so we can really kind of speak to it, and everything that is developed on anything that I've been blessed to have a hand in has really been given and provided through a victim-centric approach. So it's really just about, creating capacity and understanding and putting yourself in the shoes when we talk about that training. And I know that the National Hate Crime Task Force is currently in the process of developing and standardizing another set of training that, again, could be rolled out across the country, which would be easily accessible, and perhaps an online and an in-person piece. But, I would say that there is disparity when it comes to the level of training, the amount of training within services. And I think there are reasons that drive a little bit of that as well. So I think, could we do more in that space? Certainly we can. I think even common terminology, how hate is actually, the term hate and how there's not even a standard when it comes to that. But I'd be remiss not to take a moment to say that, we can build all the capacity, but at the end of the day, we're bound by legislation. And I can tell you right now, as police services, I'd like to think that, most, if not all police services and the members in them who are in it for the right reasons, who are held accountable, if and when they do not follow through, will investigate these matters. We'll investigate these matters with all due diligence and bring it to the Crown attorneys in the hopes of proceeding. And ultimately, it's the Crown attorneys and those consultative processes that sometimes become that final law for us. And I think sometimes we need to be able to kind of speak more openly about this. Perhaps there needs to be a conversation that happens at another level about, making amendments to some of the legislation as our colleagues have kind of mentioned. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Any comments?
Yeah. So to Ahmed, to your question, what I hear is I hear overlap with the former question as well, which was, how can grassroots communities bridge trust? Because these aren't isolated incidents. This is all happening in society. What I've heard a lot today is of the police force being in the communities, police being with communities so that they can get good information. But I think it's also important for communities to be with police, right? So, and I'll explain what I mean by that. In the question, how can grassroots communities build trust? I believe in the principle of trust, but verify. I think you can trust, but you also need data to be able to validate that trust. Is my trust well placed? Blind trust is not going to work, right? And so that's why, when you're looking at some of the recommendations from Justice Michael Tulloch in his report, he talks about civilian oversight bodies. So, when grassroots communities are participating, in initiatives with police, is our trust well placed? Those are the kinds of structural solutions that we need to be thinking about in order to make sure that best practices are actually followed through, and also that we can develop better best practices. Right? It's about creating positive feedback loops, and blind trust is not sufficient to do that. So I think making sure that, I appreciate your comments. Making sure that we have good legislative frameworks that police can do their job, but that also there's a two-way street between the communities that the police serve and the police themselves to make sure that the trust that civilians are putting inside the police force is well earned. I'd put it that way. Yeah.
Thank you, Stephen. A last comment?
Yeah, just last comment, just to top up. Thank you for that. And, you know, perhaps we can share it in this room, but, you know, we're just in the process now. So just to touch on an example of something that we're undertaking now, which again, according to public safety is novel. We applied for a grant in which we've received this grant, and over the next year, starting 2 months ago, we've actually brought together community members from grassroots organizations that represent all different faiths, cultures, ethnicities, a variety of different organizations. They've come together at the table with us, and we've started on a whiteboard. And what we've done is collectively and together, we are developing a 20 to 30-minute training module together, informed by them, led by them, with their examples, and we're there to support. And what's going to make this so unique is not only are we going to co-develop this, but we are the police. We as the police are not going to go out and deliver this. They themselves and people within their respective organizations are going to be the ones that go and deliver this training to their communities. So it's unique and it's novel. So we talk about grassroots, we talk about taking a bit of a different approach. And the great thing about evaluation that's so important is that, of course, we're bound. We do have an evaluative component in there. We're going to be reported back to Public Safety Canada next summer to speak to the efficacy of it, and through a developmental evaluation, understand some of the gaps and issues so that others could learn from it and perhaps emulate it. But what we know is that there is a bit of mistrust between us and the community. And what we know is that although it's not intentional on our part, it is an existing reality for many of the folks that are often victimized by these issues. And so, you know, to help break those barriers down, now it's them themselves that go on and have those conversations. We can sit near them. We can sit in the audience should there be more complex questions that are asked by those communities. But this is something we're very, you know, proud of at Peel because it is unique. It's something novel. It's something that we're working to. The conversations haven't been easy with our community partners because everybody has a vested interest from their own lived experience that they want to make sure certain things are keyed. And so what we'll do is we'll give them that opportunity. So we'll create this presentation, and when they're presenting it, if they're presenting to a certain segment of the community that they know have more nuanced questions, they can elaborate on that, and we can be there to support them. So I didn't want to speak to it early, but hey, we're here. We're hoping to report back next summer to let you know and be able to share a good story, but it's really something we're trying outside the box to really move this forward.
Thank you. Before we conclude, Mr. Hashim?
I just wanted to give a bit more context in terms of training and what's available. There's 178 police of jurisdictions across this country. Less than 20 of them have standalone hate crimes units. Of the ones that do have hate crimes units, not all of them standardize training for hate crimes for frontline officers. That happens periodically. There's about 4 hate crimes courses that are available, one at the Ontario Police College. There's some smaller ones that are at the Pacific. There's at the Pacific School of the RCMP. There's a bit of a portion at Depot at the RCMP, and a few smaller other pieces that exist in terms of training for frontline officers. Training is incredibly important. Halifax Police last year created their first hate crimes unit. Their numbers went from, and they created for a hate crimes unit of 2 people. And they trained all frontline officers. In 1 year, the numbers went from 26 hate incidences to 16 hate incidences to 286 hate incidences and crimes being documented in 1 year. So I think that the reality is that like trust between communities and policing happens not just simply by being in a relationship, but by getting the job done. And I think that until we can kind of prove that the job is getting done in a way that is responsive to communities, like that trust is just not going to be there. And it has to be done on the side of the policing, more so in terms of building that level of capacity. And I can tell you across this country, that capacity is extremely minimal. So like what I'd say, you know, so even now, like smaller municipalities, which are the vast majority of police forces that exist, have very little capacity. And the courses that are available are very minimal. There's a CPKN course as well, I believe. That's one I forgot to mention, which is a Canadian Police Knowledge Network. It's an online course. I think Edmonton trains through that. But you know, a number of things are being changed. So through our hate crimes task force, we've actually listed out what does the call intake person need to identify when they get a call. Like, what are the type of questions you need to get them to understand? What does the investigator need to know in order to get them to do their job better? What does the Crown prosecutor need to know in order for them to be able to see what kind of legislative framework this could potentially sit within, so that when police do create files and say this is a 718.21a, that they don't come back and say, okay, well, I don't really care about that. I'm going to get a plead guilty on something else and move this file off my desk, which is typically what happens in order to accelerate the pipeline of cases that Crown prosecutors have to deal with on a regular basis. But also for judges, how do you determine these things? So we've kind of mapped out the ecosystem in terms of what is necessary for each of the different components of people who are going to be touching hate throughout over time, and then over the time we're developing those capacities to be able to uplift the environment.
Thank you, Mohammed. So we have a lot to discuss this afternoon. I would like to thank each of the panelists for joining us today.
Can I just say something
Yes,
before we end? So we saw where the issue is. It's all about policing. Most of the questions are about that. But I want to share with you, let's not forget the children who in schools are being called names. And when we went to a school in Mississauga and the Muslim children came, they were very reluctant to share their stories with us. The trust was lacking until one child opened up. And I remember this one young boy who said, oh, no, nothing's ever happened to me. And after his colleagues shared their stories, and I shared my story, I said, as a Muslim senator, I'm not immune to Islamophobia also. I have someone from Montreal who keeps threatening to sue me if I call this study Islamophobia. But they felt comfortable enough. They all shared their stories with us. And you can see the intergenerational trauma that they're going through. And that young man shared a poem with us where we were all wanting to cry of what he had experienced. So we also have to educate the educators, because we found that they were not getting enough support sometimes from teachers. I mean, I could talk about this for hours, but I just thought let's not forget the children. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you for being here this morning. I would also thank the online audience for sticking with us throughout the morning. I will encourage you to follow updates from all today's partners through their social media. Today's event will be shared on the Fondation Canadienne des Relations Raciales. I want to say it in French, I'm sorry. YouTube channel if you want to revisit anything you heard this morning. Thank you again and have a wonderful rest of your day. As for those of us here, we will now break for lunch and come back at 1:30 for the workshop portion of today's event. And for those interested, we have a quiet space. There's a room available, and there's also like rooms if you have meetings and you need space. So thank you again, and see you at 1:30.